Mr. Bloom Origins. Batman's rogue gallery features its fair share of villains who are strong and evil. One of them happens to be the mysterious Mr. Bloom. Even though he only has one major appearance, he is not a weak character. With a terrifying look with just a flower where his face is supposed to be, he indeed looks like the stuff nightmares are made of. No one even knows his real name, and he certainly does not seem human. So how did this creepy villain become part of the Batman universe? And what makes him so strange and equally dangerous? Let's get right into it.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Mr. Bloom Origin. Mr. Bloom was created by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo and made his first appearance in Batman Volume 2, number 43 in October of 2015. The original Mr. Bloom was a scientist named Daryl Gutierrez, who worked for Power Industries and invented the nanotech reactors called seeds to give users random powers in hopes of creating more superheroes like Batman. An unidentified patient who was part of the experiments at the lab developed the ability to grow his body proportions and contort them. Using these newfound powers, he escaped the facility and stole the seeds for his use. He is first mentioned when the commissioner of Gotham City, Jim Gordon, the current Batman, comes to see Bruce Wayne and asks him about the seed that he discovered that was being sold in the Narrows by someone called Mr. Bloom. Now, as many of you must be wondering, why is Jim Batman? Bruce lost his memory after a big fight with the Joker during the Joker's Endgame arc. Jim decides to investigate and find Bloom's identity. He comes across footage of Mr. Bloom and Qui Sue meeting up, but is soon ambushed by Qui and his men. Somewhere else, Mr. Bloom meets with Mr. Cobblepot, who seems to be interested in the seeds, even though he claims he doesn't need powers to wield power. Mr. Bloom shows him the roots, but refuses to give any to Cobblepot, claiming that he's not part of his plan. Cobblepot describes Bloom as a weapons dealer who doesn't make any deals, and states his notations of building a garden. One of Mr. Cobblepot's henchmen shoots Mr. Bloom point blank in the head and claims that they root the weeds out before they can grow and burn them so they can never come back. As the group turns to leave, the henchmen are stabbed to death from behind by what looks like long branches. Mr. Cobblepot turns around in fear and witnesses the terrifying image of Mr. Bloom with his limbs grotesquely long. Bloom kills Cobblepot, exclaiming that the weeds aren't so easy to kill anyway and grow very fast. We see a flashback of Batman's memories, which gives him an insight into how Mr. Bloom worked. A young man named Peter Dugio sought out Mr. Bloom after the Penguin double-crossed him and he lost his store, which was then burned down, leaving him with nothing. The gang told him about the man at the end of the alley called Blossom Row. Peter met with the man and consumed a substance that let him develop powers. He developed wings that he used to fly, but apparently the effects of the substance didn't last long, and Peter fell from the sky and died a horrible death. Mr. Bloom had already vanished from the area without a trace. There are many mentions of Mr. Bloom in conversations between many characters in the present day. He finally arrives as Jerry is holding a presentation launching new elements, one called Batmanium 206, and how Batman is beyond one man and how they can create a legacy. Mr. Bloom crashes his ship on the stage as Jim rushes in his Batman guise to save Jerry. As the crowd turns to run, many of them are skewered by Mr. Bloom and his creepy, long root-like hands as he exclaims that the party has just started. He introduces himself to the crowd as Mr. Bloom. He states how there are so many familiar faces present, referencing his past as a test subject at Power Industries, where the current presentation was being held. As Mr. Crown tries to flee the scene, he is stabbed in the eye by Bloom. He addresses the influential crowd consisting of soldiers, politicians, and activists of Gotham City. He praises them for what they have been doing to the city, like building new police forces, reform programs, etc. He refers to Gotham City as a lawn and calls these people the rich fertilizer of the city. A bit of a weird analogy, but lawn talk goes with his character. Jerry Powers steps forward and tells him to stop and asks what he wants by doing this. Mr. Bloom tells Jerry that he wants her to keep doing what she already is. He proceeds to say that he wants to contribute to the cause and is about to pierce $1 through her eyes and asks her to give it to Batman the next time she sees him. Still, before anything can happen, Batman pounces on Mr. Bloom from behind and shoots him multiple times in the head. But if we learned anything from Mr. Bloom, Mr. Cobblepot's encounter before, we already know that that's not going to work. Bloom attacks Batman and berates him as Batman asks his suit, or as he calls it, his partner, to go pick some flowers. Sassy as the words might have been, they do not work, as Bloom easily pierces through the robot and grabs the Batmanium out of it. Just as he exclaims, the great symbol has no power anymore. He gets pinned to a giant electromagnet by Julia. She takes advantage of the fact that the seeds Bloom uses are electromagnetic in nature. Bloom taunts Jim that he is on his way to becoming the best Batman yet, and that he would love to continue their conversation when his friends aren't around anymore. But just as Batman says he'll be sure to visit Mr. Bloom in jail, Bloom manages to extract himself from the magnet and makes his escape. Jerry decides that Bloom needs to be taken out immediately and plans to use the prototypes built to use in the Batman program. While Jim muses that they don't know his location, Jerry tells him that they were able to trace him using the echo trace that Jim ran back at Quee's headquarters, and that he was hiding in a warehouse at the edge of the corner which fell along with Old Blossom. Jim convinces everyone to let him face Bloom alone. He arrives at the place and sees Bloom sitting at a window in the warehouse. He invites Batman to come and sit with him so they can talk before everything changes out there, and that it's going to look so different that he almost already misses it. Batman tells him to come down so they can talk about whatever the hell he's been planning. Batman commands the robo-suit, aptly named Rookie, to switch on the blocker and that it's time to get the bad guy, but the suit doesn't respond. Bloom repeats the same thing and Batman gets sucker punched by his suit. Batman tries to reason with the suit, but Julia tells him that Bloom has planted a transmitter inside the suit through the earpiece, probably back during the incident at Power Industries. Even though the suit is trying to resist, it would be overridden soon. Batman begs Rookie to let him go and Bloom repeats the same instruction, resulting in Batman escaping the suit's clutches. After much hassle, he regrettably has to destroy the suit, as Mr. Bloom muses that it's cold of Batman to destroy the Rookie after everything they have been through. Unfortunately, Mr. Bloom taunts Batman about his new career will be short-lived and how everything is happening because of him. He states how he wants to keep Batman so they can see the city regrow like a new garden with a brand new seed. But you already know where the twist is coming. Batman had already fried the seeds that Mr. Bloom was planning to use. Due to the electromagnetic nature of the seeds, a small charge from Batman's suit ruined them. As Bloom goes to attack Batman in rage, his attacks are subdued by the blocker Rookie had switched on. Batman finally captures Mr. Bloom and takes him away in the surveillance van with Julia and Daryl. As the crowds on the roads cheer for Batman and the trio in the van muse about the possible vacation, Mr. Bloom quips that Batman should go on a vacation in the dirt. As Jim begins to remove Mr. Bloom's mask, as you know, talking to a daisy face is frickin' weird, the roof of the van is torn open by Mr. Bloom's clones, who attack the trio when the van crashes. As Jim tries to communicate over the radio and try to figure out the situation, Mr. Bloom and the clones capture Jim stating, "Let's climb the beanstalk." Mr. Bloom's body begins to grow, so much so that he grows as tall as a 2-storied building and is still growing. The gigantic Mr. Bloom, who still has Jim clutched in his hands, and his clones begin attacking and destroying the city. He makes a public announcement: the city is about to die. Happy Tuesday! Quite morbid, yes. He exclaims that Gotham is going down and that the garden will rot. He makes quite a long, morbid garden analogy as he destroys the city. He begins to berate Jim and announces how he had a hand in bringing Mr. Bloom into being. The clones remove their daisy masks and Mr. Bloom and introduces them as criminals whom Jim Gordon had put away during his tenure as former head of the police. He claims that Jim's Batman isn't like the real Batman, who was like a wildflower, just like Bloom. He recounts his past and how he was taken to Potter's Field as he lay dying, how he had a grave with no name, about to return to the dirt. He urges the citizens of Gotham City to join him so that whatever happened to him doesn't happen to them. He announces that he's hidden over 1,000 seeds all over Gotham City. He explains that he's hidden them under floors, maybe in dirty little corners, and how anybody who would be able to feel them if they pass by. If they find the seeds and choose to keep them, one must make an incision in their skin and plant the seed into their bloodstream, and soon enough their powers would manifest. He tells the citizens that Gotham City isn't a garden but a bloody meadow, and the people need to start thinking for themselves and get what's theirs. All throughout the city, chaos ensues as the citizens fight tooth and nail to get one of the seeds. At Wayne Manor, Bruce makes his way to Alfred and demands to be taken to the Batcave so he can get his memories back and take back the mantle of Batman. To be able to save the city, Alfred refuses him and tries to not let Bruce become the man he was before, but finally agrees and the two make their way down to the cave. But Alfred has already destroyed the machine Bruce had devised as his final invention. A machine that can transfer all of Batman's training, experiences, and trauma to anyone who would become the next Batman, so his legacy could continue forever. Bruce manages to fire at the machine and regains his memories back to who he used to be through so much pain. Meanwhile, in Gotham City, Bloom causes intense havoc throughout the city. The soldiers arrive in the prototype suits made by Power Industries, but Bloom controls them with his powers and makes the suits aim at innocent civilians while the officers can do nothing but watch. Batman finally arrives in the scene and he defeats Bloom's minions and bashes them all in Batman style. Bloom uses the collider present in Power Industries to create a huge power surge that takes the energy from all the active seeds in the city and keeps growing, with the potential to destroy the entire city. As Batman comes and attacks Bloom, the villain says it's an honor to be meeting what he calls the unkillable weed. He summons the prototype suits and gets them to attack Batman. While Jim tries to stop the power surge from using a blocker with the memory of the prototype suits, Bloom breaks the antenna they plan to use to amplify the signal. He then launches into another garden analogy about how after the destruction of the city by a wild power surge, it will become a wild, wonderful garden. At this very moment, Batman comes into a robo-suit and punches Bloom right in the face, which serves him right. Bloom tells Batman that they are alike and wants the same thing for the city, and asks him to join him in creating a new Gotham. Batman refuses, and Bloom's talons pierce his suit. As Bloom is aggressively making another garden analogy and is about to attack Batman, he is blasted from the sky by Duke Robin. Batman takes his chance to grab the super seed from Bloom's back as Jim tries to close the transmitter, but it is too late as the device has become self-sustaining and is powered by the seeds of Gotham's citizens. Robin uses super magnets and pulls Bloom away to the sky. The ship Duke is on explodes, though he manages to jump out. The people of Gotham see Batman flying across the sky and start to take out the seeds planted in their bodies, which causes the power surge to lose power. Jim manages to destroy the collider using the Batmanium as it's superconductive, which results in Mr. Bloom's plan being foiled as it's obliterated to pieces. What makes Mr. Bloom so powerful? Mr. Bloom exhibits a variety of powers. First and foremost, his powers of metamorphosis, which he uses to sharpen his fingers and elongate them to stab and kill his targets. He has superhuman agility and strength. He can elongate any part of his body he desires and can grow his body to become very tall. He has extreme durability, which allow him to tolerate excessive levels of physical pain. He has been smashed through buildings, had bullets fired straight through his skull, and still survived. He can control the GCPD armored suits. He also possesses the powers of both pyrokinesis and cryokinesis. He is able to produce high-quality seeds that give everyone power. He is also a master manipulator, using his skills to convince people to join his side. While Mr. Bloom has only one significant appearance in the Batman universe, it sure is a lasting one. His creepy looks and evil actions make him a perfect supervillain. Hopefully the future holds something for this character and DC would be willing to give the fans some more of this flowery fiend. Mr. Bloom would undoubtedly make a great DCU villain. Like the live action look for his DC character alone could be enough for a decent DC movie mixed with the splash of horror that Mr. Bloom carries with himself, which would undoubtedly be a feast for the eyes.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.